The boy was hanged, until the cowboy yelled, "That's my brother's son." The rope bit into the boy's throat. His feet kicked at nothing but air. His face turned the color of old bruises, purple first, then gray. The crowd in the town square didn't move. They just watched. Some with their arms crossed. Some with their hats pulled low. A woman near the front covered her child's eyes, but didn't look away herself. It was a Tuesday. The sun sat high and mean over the desert town of Bitter Springs. The gallows creaked. The boy's body twisted slow, like laundry hung out to dry in wind that didn't care. Then someone shouted, "Stop." The voice came from the back of the crowd, rough and wild, like something torn loose. Heads turned. A man pushed through the wall of bodies, dusty boots, worn leather vest, a hat shadowing half his face. His spurs dragged through the dirt with every step, ringing out like broken bells. "Get that boy down," he yelled. The sheriff stood near the gallows with his arms folded, jaw tight. "Execution's legal, stranger. Boy stole a horse. Law's the law." The cowboy didn't stop walking. He shoved past a rancher and nearly knocked over a woman holding a basket of bread. His breath came hard. His hands shook. "That's my brother's son," he screamed. The words hit the air like a shotgun blast. Everything stopped. The boy's body still swung gently. His eyes were half closed. His lips had gone blue. But the crowd went stone silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The sheriff's face changed. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the boy, then back at the stranger. "Your brothers?" "Cut him down," the cowboy said. His voice cracked. "Cut him down right now, or I swear to God," he didn't finish. He just ran, boots pounding dirt, spurs singing. He reached the platform in 3 long strides and pulled a knife from his belt. The blade flashed in the sunlight. He sawed through the rope like a man possessed. The boy dropped. His body hit the wooden platform with a sound that made people flinch. The cowboy caught him before he rolled off the edge. He cradled the boy's head in his lap and tore the noose away from his neck. The rope left a deep red line across the skin, angry and raw. "Breathe," the cowboy whispered. His voice shook. "Come on, boy. Breathe." The boy's chest didn't move. The cowboy pressed his ear to the boy's mouth. Nothing. He tilted the boy's head back and blew air into his lungs. Once, twice, 3 times. His hands moved fast, pressing on the boy's chest, counting under his breath. The crowd watched like they were seeing a miracle they didn't believe in yet. Then the boy coughed. A wet, choking sound. His body jerked. His eyes flew open, wide and terrified, and he gasped like a man pulled from deep water. He coughed again, harder, and his hands flew to his throat. The cowboy let out a breath he'd been holding for what felt like a lifetime. He pulled the boy close, one hand on the back of his head, and just held him. The boy's body trembled. He couldn't stop shaking. "You're okay," the cowboy whispered. "You're okay now." The sheriff came forward slowly, his boots heavy on the platform. He stared down at the 2 of them, the stranger and the boy, and his face was harder than stone. "You got about 30 seconds to explain yourself, mister." The cowboy looked up. His eyes were red, but his jaw was set. "His name is Samuel. Samuel Thorne. His daddy was my brother, James Thorne." A murmur ran through the crowd like wind through dry grass. "James Thorne's been dead near 3 years, the sheriff said. "I know. And you just showing up now?" The cowboy didn't answer. He couldn't. He just looked down at the boy in his arms. This boy he'd never met. This boy with his brother's eyes and his brother's dark hair and his brother's stubborn chin. Samuel stared back at him, confused and afraid, still gulping air like it might disappear again. "Who are you?" Samuel's voice came out broken, barely more than a rasp. The cowboy's throat tightened. "My name's Caleb. Caleb Thorne." Samuel's eyes went wide. "My pa's brother?" Caleb nodded. "But..." Samuel's face twisted with something painful. "But you left. Pa said you left and never came back." "I did." "Why?" That question sat between them like a third body on the platform. Caleb didn't have an answer. Not one that mattered. Not one that could undo 15 years of silence. The sheriff cleared his throat. Boy still stole a horse. That don't change just because you showed up. Caleb stood, pulling Samuel up with him. The boy's legs wobbled, but he stayed upright. Caleb kept one hand on his shoulder, steadying him. What horse? Belonged to Walter Grimes. A gray mare, worth near $50. The boy says he didn't steal it. Someone in the crowd called out. It was an old woman with a shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She stepped forward. I heard him. He said he was just riding it back to town after it wandered onto his land. That's the truth, Samuel said, his voice still rough. I found her by the creek. She had Mr. Grimes' brand, so I brought her back. I was going to return her, I swear. The sheriff's jaw worked. Grimes said different. Said he saw you riding off with her. He's lying, Samuel said. You calling a rancher a liar, boy? If that's what it takes. The crowd shifted. Caleb felt the weight of their eyes. Some believed the boy. Some didn't. Most just wanted the show to be over, so they could go back to their lives. Caleb turned to the sheriff. Where's Grimes now? Took off after the hanging was set. Said he had business in Silver Ridge. Convenient. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. You accusing him of something? I'm saying my nephew's telling the truth. And if Grimes rode out before seeing this through, maybe he knew it too. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes it hard to think. Finally, the sheriff sighed. He looked tired. Tired and old and done with all of it. Take the boy, he said quietly. Get him out of my town. Caleb didn't wait for him to change his mind. He wrapped one arm around Samuel's shoulders and guided him off the platform. The crowd parted like water. No one spoke. They just watched as the cowboy and the boy walked through the square, past the saloon and the general store, past the church with its crooked cross, and out toward the edge of town where the desert opened up wide and empty. Samuel didn't say anything until they were clear of the buildings. Then he stopped walking. He pulled away from Caleb and turned to face him, his eyes hard despite the tears streaking through the dust on his face. Why'd you save me? Samuel asked. His voice was stronger now, but it still shook. You didn't even know me. Caleb looked at him, really looked at him, at the way he stood with his shoulders back even though his whole body trembled, at the rope burn around his neck that would scar, at the defiance in his eyes that reminded Caleb so much of James had hurt. Because you're family, Caleb said simply. Samuel's laugh was bitter. Family? You left my pa. You left all of us. I know. Then why should I believe anything you say? Caleb didn't have an answer. Not one that would fix anything. So he just stood there in the dust and the heat, letting the boy's anger wash over him like he deserved, knowing that saving Samuel's life didn't erase the 15 years he'd been gone. The last time Caleb saw his brother, James had a gun pointed at his chest. It wasn't loaded. Caleb knew that. James knew that too. But the gesture was clear enough. The message landed like a fist. Leave. Don't come back. That was 15 years ago, in the barn behind their father's ranch, with the smell of hay and horse sweat thick in the air and their father barely cold in the ground. They'd buried him that morning. By sundown, they destroyed everything he'd tried to build between them. Now Caleb stood at the edge of Bitter Springs with his brother's son beside him, and the weight of those 15 years pressed down on his shoulders like a sack of stones. Samuel hadn't spoken since they left the town square. He just walked, one hand touching his throat every few steps, feeling the rope burn that would remind him for weeks, maybe forever, how close he'd come to dying. His other hand hung loose at his side, fingers twitching like he didn't know what to do with them. Caleb wanted to say something, anything. But every word that came to mind felt wrong or too small or 15 years too late. They reached the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open desert. The sun had started its slow drop toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Caleb stopped walking. Samuel stopped too, but he didn't look at Caleb. He kept his eyes on the ground. There's a creek about 2 miles west, Caleb said. His voice sounded strange in the quiet. We can make camp there for the night. Samuel didn't respond. You need water. and rest. Still nothing. Caleb sighed. He pulled his hat off and ran a hand through his hair. It was longer than he usually kept it, starting to gray at the temples. When had that happened? When had he gotten old? Look, Caleb said. I know you don't want to hear anything I have to say. You're right, Samuel cut in. His voice was rough, damaged from the rope. I don't. But we need to. We don't need to do anything. Samuel finally looked up. His eyes were dark, just like James's had been. Just like their father's before that. The thorn eyes, hard and unforgiving. You can go back to wherever you came from. I'll be fine on my own. You almost died today. Because of a lie. Not because I can't take care of myself. You're 16 years old. 17 next month. Samuel's jaw tightened. And I've been taking care of myself since Pa died. I don't need you now. The words hit harder than Caleb expected. He looked at Samuel, this boy who was nearly a man, who'd grown up without him, who carried James's stubbornness like a birthright, and felt something crack open in his chest. Your Pa, Caleb said quietly. How did he? Why do you care? Because he was my brother. Samuel laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just bitterness and something that sounded like grief. He stopped being your brother the day you left. Caleb flinched. That's not, you left him. You left all of us. Samuel's voice rose. Ma died when I was 5. Pa tried to hold the ranch together by himself, but the debts kept piling up. He worked himself into the ground, trying to keep a roof over our heads. And when he got sick, Samuel's voice broke. He looked away, blinking hard. When he got sick, he kept asking if you come. He kept saying, maybe you'd heard. Maybe you were on your way. But you never came. The silence that followed was complete. Even the wind had stopped. Caleb's throat felt tight. I didn't know. Would it have mattered? The question hung between them like smoke. Caleb wanted to say yes. He wanted to say he would have come running. But the truth was more complicated than that, and they both knew it. What happened between you and Pa? Samuel asked. His anger had faded into something quieter, sadder. Why'd you leave? Caleb looked out at the desert, at the endless stretch of sand and scrub brush and sky. How do you explain 15 years of regret? How do you tell a boy that pride and jealousy and one terrible night can break a family beyond repair? We had a fight, Caleb said finally. About a woman and a horse. That's it? That's why you abandoned him. It wasn't just a fight. It was... Caleb struggled to find the words. It was everything. Your Pa and I, we were always competing. Always trying to prove we were better, stronger, worth more. Our father, your grandfather, he had a way of making us feel like only one of us could matter. Like there wasn't enough love or land or future for both of us. Samuel listened, his face unreadable. There was a woman, Caleb continued. Her name was Catherine. She worked at the general store in town. Red hair. Smile that could stop your heart. We both fell for her, but she chose James. He paused, the memory still sharp after all these years. I was angry, hurt. I felt like he'd won again, like he always did. So I did something stupid. The horse, Samuel said. Caleb nodded. Your grandfather had a horse. A black stallion. Beautiful animal. Fast as lightning. When he died, he left instructions in his will that the horse would go to whichever son proved himself more worthy. James thought it should be his. I thought I deserve it. So you took it. I was going to. I went to the barn that night, saddled him up. But James caught me. He had our father's old revolver. He pointed it at me and told me if I took that horse, I was dead to him. I could leave with nothing and never come back, or I could stay and admit I was wrong. Admit I was lesser. Caleb's hands clenched into fists at his sides. I chose to leave. Samuel stared at him. Over a horse and a girl? Over pride, Caleb said. Over being tired of coming in second. Over years of feeling like I didn't matter as much as he did. He shook his head. I rode out that night. I told myself I'd never look back, never regret it. I told myself James had made his choice and I'd made mine. But the truth is I ran. I ran because it was easier than staying and working through it. Easier than admitting I was wrong. Were you? Samuel asked. Wrong. Caleb looked at him. Really looked at him. Yes. The words sat between them, simple and heavy. I was wrong, Caleb said again. And by the time I realized it, years had passed. I convinced myself it was too late. That James had moved on, built a life, started a family. What good would it do to show up and reopen old wounds? He exhaled slowly. So I kept running. Kept telling myself I'd go back someday. But someday never came. Samuel's eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. He just stood there, a boy on the edge of becoming a man, carrying more weight than anyone his age should have to. He never stopped talking about you, Samuel said quietly. Even at the end. Even when he was angry, he'd tell stories. About you and him as kids. About the trouble you'd get into. About the time you saved him from a rattlesnake. About the promise you both made to take care of each other no matter what. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He loved you, even after everything. Caleb felt something break inside him. All the years, all the silence, all the pride that had kept him away, it all crumbled. He looked down at his boots, at the dust covering them, and realized he'd been walking in circles for 15 years, always moving but never getting anywhere that mattered. I should have come back, he whispered. Yeah, Samuel said. You should have. They stood there as the sun sank lower, two people bound by blood and loss, trying to figure out if that was enough to build on. Finally, Samuel spoke again. That creek you mentioned. Is it far? Caleb looked up. 2 miles, maybe less. Samuel nodded slowly. I guess we should get moving then. Before it gets dark. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something. A first step. A door left open instead of slammed shut. Caleb picked up his hat from where he'd dropped it in the dust and settled it back on his head. Yeah, let's go. They walked west together, uncle and nephew, carrying ghosts between them and wondering if the dead ever truly let go. Samuel's father died with a bottle in one hand and shame in the other. That's what the town remembered. Not the man who tried to hold a failing ranch together after his wife passed. Not the father who'd worked himself sick trying to give his son a future. Just the drunk. The thief. The man who'd stolen from the general store when times got desperate and never lived it down. They'd buried James Thorne in the cemetery outside Bitter Springs 3 years ago, but his ghost still followed Samuel everywhere. It sat beside him in church. It walked with him down the street. It whispered in the ears of every rancher, every shop owner, every lawman who looked at Samuel and saw only his father's failures. The gray mare had been standing by Miller's Creek when Samuel found her. She was drinking from the water, calm as morning, with Walter Grimes' brand clear on her flank. Samuel knew that brand. Everyone in 3 counties knew it. Grimes was the biggest rancher in the territory, owned more land than God and twice as much cattle. Samuel had done what any honest person would do. He'd caught the mare, calmed her down, and started leading her back toward town. He figured she'd wandered off from Grimes' property. Figured the old rancher would be grateful to get her back. He figured wrong. Grimes had been riding into town from the opposite direction when he saw Samuel with the horse. The rancher had pulled his mount to a stop, his face going red as a sunset, and started shouting before Samuel could explain. Thief. Horse thief. Samuel had tried to tell him, tried to explain that he'd found the mare, that he was bringing her back. But Grimes wouldn't listen. Neither would the sheriff when he came running. Neither would the crowd that gathered like vultures around a carcass. Just like his father, someone had muttered. Apple don't fall far, another voice agreed. Samuel had stood there in the middle of the street with the mare's reins in his hand and watched his fate get decided by a dead man's reputation. The sheriff had looked at him with tired eyes that had already made up their mind. The trial lasted less than an hour. The verdict came down like a hammer. Guilty. They'd scheduled the hanging for the next Tuesday. Samuel spent 4 days in a cell that smelled like piss and old sweat, listening to the carpenter outside build his gallows. Each strike of the hammer felt personal. Each nail driven home sounded like a countdown. On the morning they came for him, Samuel didn't fight. He'd learned from watching his father that fighting only made things worse. So he walked quiet to the scaffold, climbed the steps without stumbling, and let them put the noose around his neck. The rough hemp scratched his skin. The knot pressed against the side of his throat, heavy and patient. The preacher said some words. Samuel didn't hear them. He was looking at the sky, at the clouds moving slow and free, at a hawk circling somewhere high above. He thought about his mother, wondered if she was up there somewhere, waiting. Wondered if his father was too, or if shame kept ghosts earthbound. Then the sheriff had asked if he had any last words. Samuel had looked out at the crowd, at their faces. Some he recognized. Some were strangers. None of them looked like they cared whether he lived or died. They just wanted the show. "I didn't steal nothing," Samuel had said. His voice came out stronger than he felt. "But I guess that don't matter. Not when your name's already guilty." The sheriff had nodded to the hangman. The platform had dropped, and Samuel had felt the rope catch him, felt his body jerk, felt the world start to go dark and distant and wrong. Then he'd heard the voice. His uncle's voice, though he didn't know it yet. Just someone screaming, someone running, someone who cared enough to stop it. And then hands cutting him free, air flooding back into his lungs, life returning in painful, gasping waves. Now, walking beside Caleb toward the creek, Samuel touched his throat again. The rope burn felt like a brand. Like the town had marked him just as surely as Grimes marked his cattle. Property. Guilty. Less than. "Does it hurt bad?" Caleb asked. Samuel dropped his hand. "It's fine. We should clean it. Make sure it doesn't get infected." I said it's fine. They walked in silence for a while. The desert stretched out around them, all sand and scrub brush and heat shimmer. A lizard skittered across their path. Somewhere distant, a coyote called out, lonely and thin. "Your father," Caleb said carefully. What the town said about him. About the stealing. Was it true? Samuel's jaw tightened. "What do you think?" "I think I don't know. I wasn't there." "No," Samuel said. "You weren't. But I knew James. Knew him better than anyone once. And the brother I knew wouldn't steal. Not unless he was desperate." Samuel stopped walking. He turned to face Caleb, his eyes hard. He was desperate. Ma died and left him with a 5-year-old boy and a ranch falling apart. The bank wanted their money. The feed store wanted theirs. Everyone wanted something, and Pa had nothing left to give except his pride, and that wasn't worth shit to anyone. Caleb flinched at the language, but Samuel didn't care. "So yeah," Samuel continued. "He took some food from the general store. Flour and beans and dried meat. Enough to keep us from starving through winter. And he was going to pay it back. He swore he was. But the store owner caught him and called the sheriff, and the whole town found out." Samuel's voice cracked. After that, nobody would hire him. Nobody would do business with him. We lost the ranch. Lost everything. And Pa started drinking because it was easier than watching his son go hungry and not being able to do nothing about it. Caleb looked like he'd been punched. "Samuel, he died in a borrowed room above the saloon," Samuel said. His words came faster now, like a dam breaking. "Pneumonia," the doctor said. But it was really shame that killed him. Shame and loneliness, and knowing his brother had abandoned him when he needed help most. Tears ran down Samuel's face, but his voice stayed steady. "So don't ask me if the stories were true. Ask yourself why you weren't there to stop them from becoming stories in the first place." The silence that followed was absolute. Caleb stood there with the sun beating down on his shoulders and his brother's son crying in front of him. And he had no defense. No excuse that mattered. He'd chosen pride over family, and that choice had echoed down through the years like a gunshot in a canyon. "I'm sorry," Caleb whispered. "Sorry don't fix nothing." "I know." Samuel wiped his face with his sleeve. The motion made him wince. His neck was stiff, every movement pulling at damaged skin. "The town thinks I'm just like him. They think I'm a thief and a drunk waiting to happen. They look at me and see his mistakes, his failures. They don't see me at all. I see you, Caleb said. Do you? Samuel's laugh was bitter. Or do you see him? Your brother. The one you left behind. Caleb opened his mouth, then closed it. The question cut too deep for easy answers. They reached the creek as the sun started its final descent. The water ran shallow and clear over smooth stones, whispering secrets to the desert. Caleb knelt beside it and cupped his hands, bringing water to his face. Samuel sat on a rock nearby, shoulders slumped, exhaustion finally catching up to him. My pa used to bring me here, Samuel said quietly. He was looking at the water, but seeing something else. Some memory. When things got bad, when the weight got too heavy, he'd hitch up the wagon and we'd come out here. He'd let me play in the creek while he sat and just breathed. Like this was the only place he could remember how. Caleb listened, not moving. One time I asked him what he was thinking about. Samuel continued. He told me he was remembering when things were simple. When he and his brother were just two boys with their whole lives ahead of them, and no idea how badly they'd mess it all up. Samuel finally looked at Caleb. He was thinking about you. The words hit like stones. Caleb felt them land, felt them settle. He never stopped missing you, Samuel said. Even when he was angry. Even when he'd had too much to drink and he'd curse your name. Under all that, he just missed his brother. He just wanted his family back. Caleb's throat closed up. He stared at the creek, at the way the water caught the last of the sunlight and turned to gold. All those years, all that pride and silence and stubborn refusal to bend. And for what? James was dead. The ranch was gone. A boy had nearly hanged for the sins of a father who'd been destroyed by choices that never should have mattered so much. I can't fix the past, Caleb said finally. His voice was rough. I can't bring your father back or undo the years I was gone. But I'm here now. And if you'll let me, I'd like to try to make things right. Samuel didn't respond. He just sat there on his rock, a boy carrying a ghost he never asked for, trying to figure out if the man in front of him was worth the risk of believing in. The sun touched the horizon. The sky bled red and orange. And somewhere in the gathering dusk, something shifted, not healed, not fixed, but maybe opened just enough to let a little light through. We should make camp, Samuel said eventually, before it gets full dark. Caleb nodded. Yeah, we should. They didn't speak much as they gathered wood and built a small fire. But the silence felt different now. Less like a wall and more like a pause. A breath between words. A space where something new might eventually grow, if they could both find the courage to tend it. The fire cracked and a piece of wood split down the middle, sending sparks into the night sky like dying stars. Caleb watched them rise and fade. Samuel sat across from him, knees pulled to his chest, staring into the flames with eyes that looked older than 17. The boy hadn't said more than 5 words since they'd made camp. Just yes and no, and I'm fine when Caleb asked if he was hungry. He wasn't fine. Anyone could see that. But Caleb didn't push. He'd learned enough about his nephew to know that pushing only made him pull further away. So they sat in silence while the desert night settled around them. The temperature had dropped fast after sunset, the way it always did out here. Caleb had given Samuel his extra blanket without asking. The boy had taken it without thanking him. Small gestures, small acceptances. It was something. Caleb poked at the fire with a stick, shifting the logs. Orange light danced across Samuel's face, highlighting the rope burn on his neck. The mark was darker now, angry red turning to purple. It would scar. Some marks always did. We should head north, Caleb said, breaking the quiet. There's work up in Silver Ridge if you know horses. A rancher named Mackenzie owes me a favor. He'd take us both on, no questions asked. Samuel didn't look up. Us. Yeah, us. You're staying. Caleb heard the doubt in his voice. The expectation of disappointment. I'm staying. For how long? The question sat between them like a third person at the fire. Caleb set down his stick and looked at Samuel directly. For as long as you need me to. Samuel finally met his eyes. People always say that. Then they leave anyway. I'm not people. I'm your uncle. That didn't stop you before. The word stung, but Caleb didn't flinch. You're right. It didn't. And I can't promise I'll be perfect or that I won't make mistakes. But I can promise I won't run. Not this time. Samuel studied him for a long moment, searching for lies or cracks or reasons not to believe. Whatever he saw must have been enough, because he nodded once and went back to staring at the fire. They sat quiet again. A coyote howled somewhere in the distance, lonely and plaintive. Another answered from a different direction. Desert songs. Survival songs. Caleb reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather-bound Bible. It was old, worn at the edges, the cover cracked from years of being carried across hard country. He held it in his hands, feeling its weight, remembering. Samuel noticed. His eyes fixed on the book. Is that your grandfather's? Caleb said. He gave it to James the day before he died. Told him to read from it when times got hard. To remember that some things matter more than pride or land or being right. But Pa didn't get it. You have it. Caleb's jaw tightened. I took it. The night I left. I told myself I deserved it as much as James did. That if he got the woman and the ranch and our father's approval, then I could at least have this. He shook his head. I was young and stupid and so damn angry I couldn't see straight. He held the Bible out toward Samuel. I should have given it back years ago. Should have sent it to James or brought it myself. But I kept it. Carried it through every town, every job, every lonely night in places that didn't matter. Like keeping it close would somehow keep them close too. Samuel reached out slowly and took the Bible. He opened it to the first page where their grandfather had written his name in careful script. Thomas Thorne, 1847. Below that, in different handwriting, to my son James, who carries my hope forward. Samuel's finger traced the words. Pa used to talk about this. He said Grandpa promised it to him. Said it was supposed to stay in the family, passed down from father to son. He looked up at Caleb. You stole it. I did. Just like you tried to steal the horse. Caleb nodded. Just like that. Seems running from mistakes is a family tradition. Samuel closed the Bible, but didn't give it back. He held it in his lap, one hand resting on the worn leather cover. Pa told me about Grandpa once. About how hard he was. How nothing was ever good enough for him. How he'd set you and Pa against each other, then act surprised when you fought. He was a hard man, Caleb agreed. Born in harder times. He didn't know how to show love except through expectations. And when we couldn't meet them. He trailed off, remembering his father's disappointment, the way it could fill a room and crush the air out of your lungs. Is that why you fought? Over the woman and the horse? Because of him. Caleb considered the question. It would be easy to blame his father, to say the old man's cruelty had poisoned them against each other. But that would be a lie, or at least only half the truth. We fought because we chose to, Caleb said. Our father set the stage, but we were the ones who walked onto it. We were the ones who decided pride mattered more than brotherhood, that being right mattered more than being together. He looked at Samuel, and we were both wrong. So goddamn wrong. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Pa kept a picture of you, in a tin box under his bed. It was from when you were both kids, standing by the old well on the ranch. You had your arms around each other. You were smiling. Caleb felt something crack in his chest. I remember that day. We just helped our father bring in a wild Mustang. Thought we were the bravest cowboys in the whole territory. He'd take it out sometimes, Samuel continued. His voice was soft now, almost a whisper. When he'd been drinking, he'd look at it and cry. And I'd pretend I was asleep because I didn't know what else to do. Didn't know how to help him miss someone who was still alive, but might as well have been dead. Caleb closed his eyes. The image of his brother alone in the dark, drunk and grieving over a photograph, was almost too much to bear. All those years. All that wasted time. I'm sorry, Caleb said. The words felt too small, but they were all he had. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. Sorry I let him down. Sorry I let you grow up without knowing you had family who should have cared. Samuel didn't respond right away. He just sat there holding the Bible, the firelight catching the tears on his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady despite the crying. After Pa died, I had nowhere to go. The ranch was gone. No other family that I knew of. The church ladies tried to help, but I could see the pity in their eyes, the whispers behind their hands. Poor boy. Father was a drunk. Apple don't fall far. So I left, got work where I could. Stayed in barns or under bridges. Kept moving because staying still meant people would start asking questions, start seeing me as something to fix or throw away. He looked up at Caleb. I was so angry. At Pa for dying. At the town for never giving him a chance to be better. At you for not being there. At myself for not being strong enough to save him. His hands tightened on the Bible. And then today, when that rope went around my neck, all I could think was, this is it. This is how it ends. Just like Pa alone, and judged and found wanting. But you're not alone, Caleb said. I know that now. But I didn't then. And that's the thing that scared me most. Not dying. But dying and having nobody who'd remember me as anything but James Thorne's worthless son. Caleb stood up and moved around the fire. He sat down beside Samuel, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. You're not worthless. And you're not your father's shadow. You're Samuel Thorne. You're brave and honest and stronger than any boy should have to be. And I know I don't have the right to be proud of you yet, seeing as I just met you. But I am. I'm proud as hell. Samuel turned to look at him. In the firelight, Caleb could see so much of James in the boy's face. But he could see something else too. Something that was purely Samuel. A resilience. A quiet strength that came from surviving things that would have broken most people. I want to believe you, Samuel said. I want to believe you'll stay and things will be different. But I'm scared. Of what? Of hoping. Of letting myself think maybe I don't have to be alone anymore. Because if I do that, and you leave, he shook his head. I don't know if I could survive it. Caleb put his arm around Samuel's shoulders. The boy tensed for a moment, then slowly leaned into him. It was awkward at first. They were still learning each other's rhythms, still figuring out how to be family. But it was real. It was something. I'm scared too, Caleb admitted. Scared I'll mess this up. Scared I'm too broken or too late or too much like my father to know how to do this right. But I'm more scared of walking away and spending the rest of my life knowing I had a chance to be better and I didn't take it. They sat like that while the fire burned down. Two people who'd been alone for so long they'd forgotten what together felt like, trying to remember. Eventually Samuel said, Tell me about him. About my pa. When he was young. Before everything went wrong. So Caleb did. He told stories late into the night. About two brothers who'd once been best friends. About adventures and misadventures. About dreams they'd shared and promises they'd made. And with each story, something shifted. The weight between them grew lighter. The silence became less like a wall, and more like a comfortable pause. When the fire finally died to embers, Samuel was asleep against Caleb's shoulder, the Bible still clutched in his hands. Caleb carefully laid him down and covered him with both blankets. He added wood to the fire and sat watching the boy sleep, this nephew he'd almost lost before he'd even known him. The desert wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and dust. Somewhere out there, the world kept turning. Towns kept judging. People kept failing each other. But here, in this small circle of firelight, something different was happening. Someone was choosing to stay. And maybe, Caleb thought, as he finally lay down to sleep, maybe that was enough. Maybe every family curse could be broken with one simple choice. To not run. To not give up. To believe that love and blood and second chances mattered more than pride or past mistakes or the fear of getting it wrong. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant and perfect. And beneath them, an uncle and nephew slept side by side, no longer strangers, not quite family yet, but moving in the right direction. Together. Finally together.